on behalf of S&D, colleague Kirton Darling.
Thanks very much. I have a few comments, a few questions as a result of the presentation. It'd be interesting to hear Commissioner Malmström this afternoon in Inter on ISDS, so I won't touch on ISDS. But I did want to, I've got to be very careful, but slightly contradict the chair when he said that all information on the negotiations is available and on the website. That's still not the case. We still have a problem with transparency around the negotiations, and particularly some of the texts which are being put together in terms of consolidated texts. It would be a really welcome step if it was possible for MEPs to be able to access consolidated text, so we would be able to see exactly what's being put on the table. I mean, the scale of these negotiations is such that really the EU and the US should be operating according to the WTO standards in terms of transparency in trade talks. I think that would create a lot more public certainty than anything else. But I had a few more specific questions. In terms of the energy chapter, I think it's worth reflecting. We're increasingly getting concerns from our constituents about certain parts of the energy chapter, and you included it under the disciplines section in terms of transparency and licensing and rules around the regulation. There are rising concerns around rules and policy on exploration and exploitation of shale gas and unconventional gases, and whether TTIP will roll back national decisions. It would be really interesting to have a clear statement from the Commission on that. But beyond that, in terms of the energy chapter, the indications up till now was that the US wasn't that keen to get into a comprehensive energy chapter, that they wanted to go for very, very specific energy sections. So, but your presentation gave the indication that they're willing to talk about a lot more on the table. And I think one of the areas where we could see a really positive agenda for TTIP is around standards on energy efficiency and around some of the kind of climate and energy debate. So it'd be interesting to hear your view on that as well. Finally, in terms of the other chapter, my understanding is in terms of the SME chapter that there's also a difficulty from the US side of actually putting something concrete down on the table, whereas we, and I take the point, whereas we in Europe have put down quite a comprehensive proposal. So what are the prospects of a good SME chapter? Because that will be key to get the buy-in from small businesses. Thank you.
Madam, I would like to...
On fracking, a number of you made a number of questions, had a number of questions on fracking, but it's clear that when we think of energy and raw material disciplines in TTIP, they would in no way call into question the sovereign right of countries, whether it's the United States or European member states, to decide whether or not to exploit natural resources. That's not what TTIP would aim to do. What TTIP aims to do, and that's again my job as a trade negotiator, is to make sure that once products are on the market, that there is then free competition for those products or those services. And that is, that's the nuts and bolts of what trade negotiators do. But the sovereign decision of countries whether or not to allow fracking, the environmental considerations that are taken, etc., are not in the ambit of what we would intend to negotiate in TTIP. That wouldn't be acceptable to us, but it certainly also wouldn't be acceptable to our American friends. In terms of transparency, I think what we are doing currently is that all of our texts, all of the European proposals, you can now see on the internet. So they are fully public. Ms. Kirton-Darling mentioned consolidated text. Those are texts which also include United States proposals. They are available to all members of the Inter Committee, if I'm not mistaken. But again, that is something on which I will take your comments back and refer them to my hierarchy in DG Trade. On SMEs, a number of you asked questions on SMEs. I think it's a joint ambition of the US and ourselves to have provisions throughout the agreement that facilitate trade, notably for smaller companies. I think in the US, they're just as aware as we are that SMEs could trade much more if the trading was made easier for them. And the key issue, at least for us in that negotiation, is this idea of having a single portal where all the information is brought together if you want to export to the United States. Because we have this single portal for SMEs who are abroad and who want to export to the European Union market.